Doesn't even look like you added anything. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. Another week of playoffs and Game of Thrones to discuss, and that's pretty much going to be it. So we'll dive right into it after copy, but I'll introduce us at the top of the hour. I'm your host, Ray Alvarez. You can find me most places as Nerd Numbers. With me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. Say hey, Brian.
Yeah, what's going on, Dre? And to answer your question about the script, no, I have no NBA stuff in the script. I can talk about all that. But for Game of Thrones, I had so much that I didn't even put in the script. I just have my own notes. So there you go.
Yes. So you're aware, as anybody who's behind the scenes and has listened to us for a while, Brian and I kind of email back and forth. Brian puts together a script that we read off of. Dre goes on 20 million tangents off script, but it gives us something to come back to. I put together this week's script kind of early because, as I mentioned, there was Game of Thrones on there, and I had so many thoughts, and I was like, I got to start writing it down. I gave Brian a spoiler warning, and don't worry, when we get to Game of Thrones, we'll give you the spoiler warning so you can check out, and it'll be at the end of the show so you can get regular basketball content if you're not caught up. And we're going to leave Avengers off the table entirely, although, full disclosure, Brian, I didn't even see the first half of the Avengers thing. After I think about the first 7 Marvel movies, I think I'm about 50%. I kind of catch them up periodically if I'm interested. So
just wait.
Here is some real spoilery stuff, Brian, in terms of how nerdy I am. I'm already in trouble. So, for instance, we're going to talk the playoffs. I didn't have it in me to watch the Nuggets play Game 7 against the Spurs. First off, I just didn't like it. It actually takes effort. I don't have cable, so I actually have to find a way to watch the game, and I didn't pay for League Pass this season. But I didn't want to do it because I knew I'd just be too frustrated going in and out and in and out. And I kept checking in to the box score, just the play-by-play, and then trying to leave and coming back and forth. So that's me. I didn't read the last Game of Thrones book. I just read the Cliff Notes. So, I've hit that level of nerdiness where I check the box score even for things like Game of Thrones, Avengers, and if it doesn't pique my interest, I'm like, eh. And so, for instance, Captain Marvel has my interest, but I'm just going to wait till that comes out on video on demand. Anyway, way too long of an intro before getting to our sponsor. I'm going to do that, and then we'll get right into the playoffs. So before we get started, or briefly after we already got started, I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Sunshower.io. They're a company that creates cloud-based solutions to ensure you aren't overspending on the cloud. Industry experts project that money lost on unused, idle, and over-provisioned cloud computing resources will reach over $14 billion in 2019. That's where Sunshower.io comes in. Sunshower.io's cloud computation engine sifts through your utilization data to find the best priced cloud, the right instance sizers, and clever solutions for perfectly provisioned cloud computation resources. Interested in saving 40 to 80% on your cloud computation bills without sacrificing functionality? Go to sunshower.io/numbers. Oh my God, Brian, I'm messing this up. But you can tell when I'm reading off a script versus going off the cuff, I guess. And they'll help you out. Thanks so much, and on to the show. All right, Brian, we got 4 playoff series to discuss, and then, of course, we can also kind of talk the fallout of the playoff series that led into it. So let's just break it down. As we are recording, the Toronto Raptors are playing the Philadelphia 76ers, but the Philadelphia 76ers were, thumped incredibly convincingly by Kawhi in Game 1. Now, it looks like they're actually fighting back in Game 2, so that's definitely good. But what was very amusing is that game, the Spurs got eliminated from the playoffs and DeMar DeRozan shooting terribly. And I don't know if it was a career high, but Kawhi got 45 points in the playoffs. So that was definitely a statement game between the two. So anybody that's they were fine after the Kawhi trade, it's just very much of the no, you really wanted Kawhi to do what he did.
Yeah, and, I guess this outcome isn't that surprising so far. Toronto was a cut above Philadelphia in their regular season, and again, just a couple of games, right? Who knows what's going to happen in the series? But what I'm saying is we should expect Toronto to be the better team coming in based on the numbers. And people will always say, oh, they're a terrible playoff team or whatever. Cynics might even say, well, DeRozan is gone and he's the worst clutch shooter of all time. But
that was what was fascinating to me is DeRozan was actually having a fairly good series against the Denver Nuggets. In Game 6, him and LaMarcus Aldridge shot 3 billion mid-range jumpers and they all went in, which was just frustrating. In Game 7, where the Nuggets won by 4, DeMar DeRozan was just horrendously bad. I forget what he was at. I think he finished at 33% field goal percentage, and I think, that means he missed like 15 shots. So what was remarkable to me, and I tweeted this to Arturo Galletti, who's had this for years, noted that essentially the Toronto Raptors' bad luck boils down to DeMar DeRozan. And I was amazed where DeMar DeRozan's poor shooting still kept his team from advancing to the playoffs. It's a streak.
Yeah, and Lowry wasn't great either, but I guess the reason I bring it up is they play bad in like 2 playoff series. I mean, that's much more likely to be bad luck than something systemic, especially considering they've been winning millions and millions of games the last few regular seasons.
Yep.
And I think the big thing for Toronto, and this was kind of a thing earlier in the season, he had a pretty good year, but he's stepping up even more in the playoffs, and that's Siakam, right? Of course, Leonard is great. We knew that. Maybe there was a question if he's going to be healthy or not coming in the season, but he proved that. Once we got to the playoffs, we kind of knew Leonard was going to be fine. But Siakam stepping it up, also having a really big game in the first game. Yeah, Toronto looks really good to me and looks like they could, challenge to get out of the East.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that bugs me, by the way, because I in general hate this and I hate when it pays off, is when a team has a strategy saying, we're going to get this player for matchup in the playoffs. In basketball, that is utterly ludicrous, but this used to happen all the time. Out West, teams would intentionally try and trade to adjust to Shaquille O'Neal. And you'd go, you are assuming, first off, you're going to make the playoffs. Second off, that you're going to face the Lakers. And third off, that you're going to have a player that can match up with Shaquille O'Neal. That is ludicrous. I don't know if you recall, the Phoenix Suns ended the D'Antoni run out there early by trading away Sean Marion for Shaquille O'Neal, and their logic was, we've got to get someone to compete now that the Lakers have Pau Gasol. And I think the Spurs did something silly too. I'm trying to remember, like they got Richard Jefferson or whatever. But, when teams are like, we've got to find a way to match up with this player in the playoffs, we didn't necessarily think Marc Gasol, the trade for Marc Gasol for Toronto was a good one because Valanciunas we thought was better. The out I gave them at the time is I was like, he's getting a lot of do not plays. He's not looking healthy. It was very similar to John Henson for the Bucks, where I was like,
gave up DeLon Wright too. Let's remember.
Yeah, but he
gave up a lot.
I mean, my general philosophy is that even if we like a player, if you have a player on your team that's not getting played either via health or other reasons, Kenneth Faried for the Nuggets was similar. I was like, he's just never going to get played. You might as well get something back for him. That was my take. Marc Gasol, though, were like, he's older. I don't know if he's worth it, but a lot of people were like, he matches up really well with Embiid. And I would say to that, you don't even know you're going to be playing the Philadelphia 76ers in the playoffs. Why are you worrying about a matchup there? To that end, Joel Embiid in the first 2 games so far. So, by the way, we're 7 minutes into his first shift, or 7 minutes into the first quarter on game 2. So he even knows. But he has not looked great against Marc Gasol. So if it pays off, I'm going to be pissed because in general, I'm like, that is a really, really foolish strategy, but it might pay off in this playoffs.
I think it's more likely if Embiid has a bad series and the 76ers get destroyed. I think it's his health is a more likely reason. He's kind of been a game-time decision for the last few games, I think. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Medical people will say how he looks good or bad out there. I don't know, but that could be a problem.
All right. I will say what was fascinating is Arturo last series, showed something that at least I want to bring attention to as to why playoffs are hard. Because he put out his projections, American Numbers on Twitter if you don't follow him. And he basically said his take was the Toronto Raptors looked like they were most likely, and by the way, most likely gets weird here, but he said they were most likely to lose to the Orlando Magic in 6. And to explain that, right, you have a set of bins, right, that go between 4 games and 7 games for a series, back and forth, right? Team 1 wins in 4 games, Team 2 wins in 4 games, Team 1 wins in 5 games, Team 2 wins in 5 games, etc. And so he was saying the most likely outcome was Toronto winning, but the bin that won, so the same way that like Trump won the Electoral College, was, or I guess more appropriately, the Republican nominee, that the first past the goalpost outcome for last series was Toronto to lose in 6 to Orlando. However, after the series, it came out and he said, wow, Nick Nurse coached different than I thought. And to me, that is the key when you look at any person trying to project the playoffs, is that you don't know how coaching is going to work because sometimes coaches just do weird things. We're going to maybe talk a little bit about that with the San Antonio Spurs and the Denver Nuggets. You don't know what players are going to be healthy because one player being healthy or not. So, I hate to stay on this, soapbox, but projecting things is really, really hard. And when you see someone really confident, that's been my general take. If someone's more than 80% confident on any series, I kind of just throw it out, because 80, as you kind of note, Brian, like 20% happens all the time. And also we've seen injuries, weird coaching matchups, players going off. We've seen all of this happen in the playoffs. So I wouldn't get over that just yet. I'll move on to Milwaukee versus the Celtics next, if you don't want to finish up Toronto versus 76ers.
I don't know. I don't have too much there. Philadelphia will compete probably. They have good players. But yeah, Toronto does seem like the favorite. Anytime you're up 1-0 and you're the home team, it's got to be really low odds to come back from that.
All right, so speaking of up 1-0, there's only one undefeated team in the playoffs right now, and that is the Boston Celtics. And of course, they did stun the Milwaukee Bucks, the best team in the NBA by far. Now, to be fair, we'll give the Milwaukee Bucks a few things. One, part of that greatness was Malcolm Brogdon, who they are now missing. Two, we don't really like Brook Lopez, and we know he's going to be getting more play in the playoffs. And three, I think this is more key, and I've mentioned this a lot. If you don't know the health of a team going into the playoffs, it really skews things. So the Boston Celtics were, I think, the fourth or fifth best team going into the playoffs. Their SRS was reasonable, but I looked at their regular season numbers, Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, and Al Horford all missed significant time and are now playing more minutes and appear to be more healthy. So I think Gordon Hayward's shooting over 60% true shooting in the playoffs. Kyrie Irving's obviously doing great. Al Horford, is doing what you would want a big man to do, which is to rebound. He's out rebounding a 7-footer, so good on you, Al Horford. So, the Boston Celtics' health going into the playoffs wasn't really known, and they've looked healthy. And so that is amazing. Now, that 22...
One exception is Marcus Smart, who some people care a lot about. I don't as much, but yeah.
Well,
generally,
actually,
you're right.
On this team, what we've noted, that was one of their interesting issues, is that team construction is a very funny part of NBA teams. And for the Boston Celtics, back in the day, right, when DeMarcus Cousins was on the table, we were arguing they really had a glut in the backcourt, right? They had Terry Rozier, Jason Tatum, Kyrie Irving, Jaylen Brown, right? They have all of these great young, and then you were mentioning Marcus Smart as well, right? Marcus Smart, right? You have a ton of good, talented backcourt players. Arguably,
I'll put Tatum in the front court, but the rest I'll agree with you on.
But I think he's more of like a forward, like he's more. It's very much like the Draymond Green principle. He can play power forward if you need him to, but really, you want him to play small forward. So they've got a glut of these players. They really need a talented big. Marcus Morris, I'm actually that would be one thing I'd say is I'm a little wary if he'll keep it up. But Brad Stevens appears to be a good coach. Marcus Morris has actually played okay. So we were saying that. And so the Celtics losing Marcus Smart obviously hurt, but they have enough players at that position that I wasn't particularly worried. But I did want to, it occurs to me, I haven't really dug deep into game one. But I mean, one thing that really stood out to me, which is hilarious, is our boy Brook Lopez, who we've said is very good at shot blocking and shooting threes, which are not two qualities you really want out of a big. Didn't really hit from three and didn't rebound versus Al Horford, who I believe got a double-double, right? Al Horford, 2010. So it's one of these interesting things where everybody is praising Brook Lopez for doing these kind of, what's not the word, not anachronistic, similar to anachronistic, because anachronistic means out of time, but like not typical things for a big to do. And we're like, just get a decent big. So Brook Lopez was like a hole, which allowed another big, another decent big. We actually would, I think, argue Al Horford's a little undersized at the center, but Al Horford looked great against Brook Lopez. So that's been one of our fears. I mean, some other stuff we'll give, this is kind of just reversion to the mean. Eric Bledsoe and Sterling Brown both look terrible. These are two players that, I think Sterling Brown won the game ball, in my opinion, one of the games in the first round. Eric Bledsoe, we thought was, we wrote an article about a fantastic pickup he was. Chris Middleton played decently, right? Didn't shoot amazingly. And Giannis did okay. So it's one of these where, do we expect reversion to the mean on these players? And I would say yes. But I would say also annoyingly is this series, when we factor in a lot of things. This is Arturo's theory, the top six. If you play the top of your rotation, the Celtics might arguably look more competitive doing that, especially since we would say Brook Lopez really is a weakness there. Additionally, the health, right? The Celtics are healthier than they were in the regular season. The Bucks are more beat up than they were in the regular season. So we'll just have to see how this all shakes out. But I mean, a lot of these players, even if you think Boston is amazing D, two for 10 from Pat Connaughton, 1 for 7 from Sterling Brown, 1 for 5 from Eric Bledsoe, 1 for 5 from Brook Lopez, 5 for 12 from Chris Middleton, 7 for 21 for Giannis. I mean, I can't buy that keeping up.
Yeah, and there was a 538 analysis on that game, a coaching analysis that was saying something like, they were kind of doing something similar on Giannis to what teams would do on Harden, like funneling him in one direction, but then they would double team him when he drove all the time. And so they, and he's the best, driving, finishing guy in the league. So they were just trying to force him to be a passer, a 3-point shooter. And it kind of worked because, they really shut down his drive. But he did make 3 out of 5 threes, I want to say. So that might be a bad sign for Boston in the future if Giannis starts hitting threes. But
he would have easily gotten a triple-double, I would imagine, if the rest of his team shot like they're supposed to, because I know one of Giannis's, LeBron James would do the same thing, right? He drives, you double-team him, he passes it out to someone who's open. The Bucks have been awesome about this. Jonathan Weiler a few weeks ago noted that something he was impressed by on the Bucks is their ball movement. So normally that happens, but if you saw all of their players, even good 3-point shooters, just weren't hitting. So they start hitting, it's fine. Of course, I'll spew the same line I have every year, I think for the past 3 years now. By the time reversion to the mean happens, the series can be over. So obviously it is paramount that the Bucks come out and win next game. But, we've already seen this playoff series, a team give up the first game and then come back for a spectacular finish. We'll talk them next, actually. So let you finish up the Bucks, then we'll get to Denver.
No, I don't have too much more to say except that, just like that other series we were talking about, being down one game when you're the home team, even if you're a much better team, that's going to hurt them. Speaking of Arturo's model, he's only got them at 26%. Seems a little low, but it's probably not close to 40. It's probably under 40, right? So I don't know. It's going to be sad if the Bucks go out this way, Dre, just like the Night King, just going out for no reason. But
so first of all, I'm going to give you. That's a red flag. That's actually.
It's a spoiler. Yeah. Oh man. Okay, so we were talking about this, Dre. For whatever reason, on social media, Avengers spoilers, those were banned. No one could use them. The Russo brothers themselves were like, no one spoil the Avengers. I didn't see any spoilers at all. But people went to town on Game of Thrones spoilers, like 5 minutes.
I'm not going to go out of my way to edit it out, but I did say we were going to have a segmented show. So don't re-listen to that. It was a very quick line from Brian. If you've been on Twitter or Facebook, it's nothing more than you've seen there. But I'm keeping us in line, Brian. I'm going to ref this podcast right. I'm not going to be like the refs against the Houston Rockets. I'm going to do it right.
Give me space to land on my jump shots.
And then I will say, I'm watching the box score, though. The Raptors are coming back, but 76ers had a 14-point lead, man. So we'll see. This series could be competitive, and it was without Joel Embiid doing well. So we'll have to see what happens. Yeah. Well, and by the way, Jimmy Butler has played well in the playoffs. It's one of, I'd say, Butler and Kawhi. All of this weird complaints about how their attitudes or whatever, like clearly they have helped their teams out. All right, let's get on to Denver. Now, Denver versus Portland is 0-0. I saw someone show some hate because they posted a lot of the analysts' takes on who was going to win between Denver and Portland, and I believe more had Portland than had Denver. Now, to be fair, this is kind of interesting. So Portland played Oklahoma City, and Denver played San Antonio. According to SRS, like we said, San Antonio was a worse team than Oklahoma City. That being said, Oklahoma City had a much stronger start. I believe post All-Star break, I was looking this up today, and I didn't check competition, but post All-Star break, the Oklahoma City Thunder actually had a losing record, whereas post All-Star break, the Spurs had a winning record and at one point were the hottest team in the NBA. So there's your mileage may vary as to who had a harder matchup. Additionally, like Russell Westbrook has just not looked right. I don't know what's going on there. And then Damian, obviously, like I did want to shout this out. I realize I'll ask your take. So we have some amazing shots to look at, maybe some amazing video clips. But the Damian Lillard 35-footer to ice the game, Brian, it was tied. He had like a full shot clock. He was trying to dribble past Paul George. Paul George was doing amazing defense. He doesn't get anything. He takes a pull-up 35-footer, and Paul George, he's as close as I would say he should reasonably be to it. He gets his hand up. Damian Lillard sinks the ball. He's memed forever. His team mobs him. There's an image of him looking at the camera on the floor as his team's mobbing him. It's famous. I'll bring it up later in the show. Don't mention it yet, Brian, though. I'll give you a red card.
That's what I'm going to say. You can't ask me about Damian Lillard. That Damian Lillard is Game of Thrones section. He's not NBA. Sorry.
Okay. We'll push off Damian Lillard.
I will answer your first question, though, which is it's a tough call. So the Spurs play a lot better than Oklahoma City, clearly, in that round. But
I would say both in that round and then post All-Star break. So that's
exactly
what we're saying. Playoffs is hard because the most clean analytical thing to do is you take both teams SRS. Maybe I've said this before, something you could do is you take what you think the playoff rotation of each team will be. You just take the adjusted per production per 48 for both teams. You kind of compare. You maybe do some home court finagling, and you say which team you think will win. And for the record, Dave Berri, I believe there used to be a challenge, the True Hoop Challenge. I think I'll have to take a look because Henry Abbott's bringing that back. It used to be an ESPN property run by Henry Abbott. Every year he would basically do a playoff pool where in each round, everybody, a bunch of analysts, including Dave Berri, would pick their pick and their number of games for each round. And whoever was closest, and I forget the scoring, would win something. And Dave Berri, I believe, has the all-time high score for that. So of all the years that have done it, I believe he has the highest score in that, and he would always do something like that. Basically, SRS with some home court factored in. So that's what he would do as his model. That's the easy thing. There are other things you can start finagling. That's all I was saying about San Antonio versus OKC is saying if you looked at them going into the playoffs, Paul George, we thought Paul George was an MVP candidate for most of the season. And I'm not saying he's not. I would still put him top 5 in my MVP. But down the stretch compared to Giannis and James Harden, I was just like, yeah, he's not it. I would argue Kevin Durant overtook him at the end. So, that's kind of my take there. And then, we saw Russell Westbrook's shooting turn horrible. He's shooting like a player out of the 60s. So that was my only take there is between the two teams, you could make a case that maybe San Antonio was a tougher matchup. And then, I'm really the only player I'm scared of in next round for the Nuggets is Damian Lillard. Some people are claiming that Enes Kanter is now injured too. So
yeah,
the Portland Trailblazers lost Nurkic late in the season, which was huge. They replaced him with Enes Kanter. Now Enes Kanter might be banged up, and Nikola Jokic is one of the best bigs in the NBA. Certainly, I would argue this. It's like James Harden and Jokic. I would argue Jokic is the best offensive big man in the NBA right now. I don't think it's really close. He's one of the best passing big men ever.
Well, he's kind of like the Nuggets point guard even, isn't he? Like it's not really Murray.
I would say I remember last year because I was kind of looking at the Nuggets wins per 48, and they're one of the few teams where I would even a couple of years ago start saying between Will Barton, Jamal Murray, and Gary Harris, I was looking at their possession data. So how much each player holds the ball, et cetera. And I was like, they don't really have a definitive point guard. One of the parts about the wins produced formula is we do think we should split it by position, point guard up to center. And a couple years ago, I made the argument, well, you could consolidate the wings, shooting guard and small forward, and the bigs, power forward and center. The data seems to disagree. It does seem to say there's a big enough difference between all those positions. We really should separate them out. It's on the to-do list, people. But I was looking at the Nuggets and going, most teams have an obvious point guard. The Nuggets really do not. And then you just brought up a key point. Nikola Jokic is really a point forward. And there are a couple players like this, I would argue, Ben Simmons, kind of, depending on what you think he does on the defense, LeBron James, Giannis. These are players that are big players that really do handle the ball a ton. So they have Jokic. So Jokic is one of the best offensive bigs in the NBA, if not the best. And if there is certainly a difference in that as your front court versus Steven Adams, who we think is a great player. Also, another argument I've heard for what it's worth is Steven Adams looks like he was banged up this year. We've always thought Steven Adams is a great player. He did not show up in the playoffs, and I've heard some people speculate injury.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that, and so for the Oklahoma City piece that you wrote, for the playoff preview, basically, when I looked into their numbers, what I said in that piece was basically their big three did look like they were fine in the regular season. Of course, Westbrook played bad, and then Adams apparently was hurt maybe, so that could have been it. But I was looking for the Oklahoma City Thunder to be better in the playoffs in the regular season because they rely on those superstars so much and less on their depth and their bench, and who are not as good as some other teams in the playoff, right? But when two of those three stars didn't perform, I haven't looked at Georgia's numbers actually,
It was pretty good.
So they were just sunk in the playoffs. It sounds like George was the only guy competing. I think Cephalosha actually, but oh no, sorry, he's on the Jazz. I'm getting totally confused. But anyway, yeah, I have to say that the eye test for me is just different than the numbers. Like, I guess I'm just have the wrong take for these teams here and have all year. I don't get the Spurs at all. It feels like Popovich just held them together with duct tape. They don't have a lot of good players anymore. So, yeah, I don't really know how they gave the Nuggets a run. I'm not really sure.
A couple of players. Derek White went off and just did
that's true. Derek White.
Was like, what the hell? And then in game 6, LaMarcus Aldridge and DeRozan, as I said, just shot lights out. Yeah. And in that game, I believe Jokic got a triple-double, like a 40-point triple-double. So it's kind of like, that's what always makes the playoffs rough. And, you can go through any great team's regular season and you can find like a clip of 3 or 4 games where just like a team shocks them that shouldn't. That's always my favorite part is the Denver Nuggets are one of the few teams to take down both the 72-win Bulls and the 73-win Warriors. It's like a mediocre team can beat a great team. That happens all of the time. So when you're trying to start explaining a playoff series and go, well, this is clearly what happened, that's really hard. Although I will say one thing about that series that's amusing, though, is Popovich might have made a mistake. There was either a miscommunication or mistake, which is essentially the Nuggets were up by 2 with the ball, and you really need to intentionally foul them to not let them run out the clock.
I saw that.
And, I saw a Popovich press conference where I think he was trying to shout at LaMarcus Aldridge to do it, and he said he clearly didn't hear me. So there was a blunder of sorts there, which was just, what was kind of odd to see, but I'll take it. That was a very stressful game as a Nuggets fan. Sky's the limit, and this is the last thing I'll say on that, Brian, before we get into our next series, which is arguably the current Warriors window opened with an upset of the Denver Nuggets. Against what happened was David Lee got injured, so they put in they basically upgraded Draymond Green to power forward center. They beat the Nuggets in the playoffs, arguably I keep using the word arguably, sorry, to the point that Andre Iguodala said he wanted to play with the Warriors. So that season they went, they had an upset against the Nuggets. Next season they pick up Iguodala. Boom, he gets Finals MVP. This team goes on to win 3 titles in 4 years. Amazing, amazing core. The Denver Nuggets upsetting them in the playoffs is a really good bookend. And it being the opening Denver Nuggets window. We talk about this all the time where people like narrative more than they like numbers. If you just say a good team beat a better team or a good team beat a worse team and that was supposed to happen, that's fine. Or variance happened, that's fine too. We say that all the time, but people love narrative. So I'm saying from a narrative perspective, the Nuggets closing the Warriors window and then Kevin Durant leaving in the offseason, that's good narratively to me. If I was a writer, that's what I would go for, Brian.
Oh, man. Well, I won't talk about Game of Thrones now then. But anyway, no, I think, Portland is going to be missing these big men. It seems like Cantor will play, but maybe not a lot or maybe not right away. They're going to have to go to Myers Leonard or Zach Collins otherwise. Myers Leonard has just been really bad for a long time, but then somehow had a good year this year out of nowhere. I think he's much older than 25. Maybe not. Maybe he's like 25, so maybe that was it. But Zach Collins was a really, really good player in college at Gonzaga. Hasn't done much so far in the NBA, though, unfortunately. So, yeah, Portland's going to need Cantor, and they're going to need Lillard to have some more 35-point shots. I think Denver should be a pretty big favorite here.
I would hope so. I mean, I anything less than the conference finals is going to be a disappointment to me. It is funny because for years with the Denver Nuggets, when they would lose in the first round, I would say, look, making the first round of the playoffs is so much better than so many other things. Consistently being a first round playoff exit team is so much better than being a lottery team, etc. And now that the Nuggets are past the first round of the playoffs, I'm like, oh, come on, finals, title. It's like, it is amazing how addicting that gets, how quickly to just go, you get a little bit and you want more. And I mean, this will take me into our next subject. The Warriors are leading the Houston Rockets 1-0. Brian, tons to talk here, but the first thing I'm going to talk is Kevin Durant. Because what is really interesting to Kevin Durant here is he reminds me so much of Shaquille O'Neal in Orlando. So for those that don't know, it'd be shocking. Shaquille O'Neal was drafted by the Orlando Magic. It was an amazing draft pick for them. Then the next draft, they lucked in like a 1% chance of getting the number 1 pick, which they got, and they turned that into Penny Hardaway. Shaq and Penny Hardaway are one of the most amazing duos ever. They make the NBA Finals, heavy favorite before losing to the Houston Rockets of all teams. And then Shaquille O'Neal, there was this brief window in time in NBA history where you didn't have a player's restricted free agency. So right now what would happen with Shaquille O'Neal is if he wanted out of his contract, the Kawhi Leonard situation would happen. His team would say, okay, he decides to look around. Even if he accepts another deal, they just match it, and he's a Spur, or in this case, an Orlando Magic player again. But he was in a brief window of time where the Lakers offered him a max contract, and they did it before the Orlando Magic did. The Orlando Magic were trying to play hardball, and Shaq was basically out the door at that point. And it's interesting. I've read some like HR Quora answers where, that's just bad news. If you're at a company and another company offers you a raise that just blows away your current company's salary, like that never works out well, is what HR people say. Like you're not coming back. Even if they match your offer, you're probably going to end up leaving in the near future anyway, just for whatever reason. So there was some kind of bad blood where, Orlando Magic fans were kind of turning on Shaq. For what it's worth, he'd started his injury stuff. The Phil Jackson did a really good job of managing Shaquille O'Neal's injury issues, his conditioning when he was in the Lakers, but he had started getting injured more frequently, so he was like missing 20 games a year. So when the Magic said, we don't know if we want to pay you a max contract, some of the fans were like, yeah, we don't need this guy. We've got Penny Hardaway, who's great. Shaquille O'Neal is overpaid. He's broken down all the time. How'd that work out for you Magic fans? That's what it feels like with Durant to me, because all of the season I've seen people going like, Curry's more valuable than Durant. Durant's just, stuck up or whatever. And you watch his, and it's just honest, by the way. You have one fewer title at least and are just nowhere close to the same level without Durant. In that first series against the Clippers that scared the Warriors, Durant played lights out, and that's why you won. I think he got like 50 points in a game, right, Brian? Like a career record. Durant's the best player on your team right now. I'm sorry. And it is really weird to watch a team kind of turn on him like this. So, I hope for your sake he's back, but it is weird.
Well, no, I think the reason people have turned on him is because everyone assumes 100% that he's gone. So they're like, well, if you're gone, then, screw you. I don't care if you're still playing for us. And we've talked about this before, right, on what, Curry versus Durant, all the different reasons. People like Curry's style, that he's, a unique player, and he first started playing with that style, in the Bay Area. So they feel, affinity for him because of that. Also, he's seen as being more of a normal person and not a superhuman, although we've talked about it a million times, that's so bogus. He is a superhuman athletically, and with his advantages being the son of an NBA player growing up. So, yeah, I mean, I do think it's mostly bullshit in terms of trying to, say what the truth is. But I think the psychology of it makes sense. People are like, Durant, if you're out the door already, then, I'm not going to root for you as hard in your last few games. I don't disagree with that. I appreciate these last few games he's giving the Warriors, and I enjoy watching him. But, yeah, it's just about loyalty for the future, I think, is why they don't like him. And, yeah, I do agree with you. He played really, really well in that series. And, this is always the story of every series we talk about, right, Dre? It's health. Curry is playing with a bad ankle. He rolled his ankle in the last game. So that might be the reason why he's not taking as many shots. But he did make the game-winning shot in that first game against the Rockets.
And okay, we'll get to the Rockets in just a sec. I did want to make.
We're still talking Clippers. Sorry.
I was going to make. Oh no, that's fine. I was going to make a weird comparison to Kevin Durant though, just to end this off. So I wanted to compare him to two film actors, Kevin Smith and Adam Sandler, because this is what's interesting to me. The Warriors are one of the greatest dynasties ever. We were talking this a little last week where even if you start going back to past eras, essentially you have to like the Celtics in the 50s and 60s, the Lakers in the 80s, right? Maybe the Bulls in the 90s, where you have this sustained greatness. But when you really factor in the modern NBA CBA, the modern playoff structure is much tougher for any given team than even Michael Jordan's, right? Michael Jordan's teams that won 6 finals, they had a 5-round first round playoff, right? Which is way different than having a best of 7. If for no other reason, then it wears you down, right? It's a couple extra games, so you're more likely to be beat up. We saw that cost, without question, having best of 7 series against some really good teams cost the Warriors at least one finals. So we've seen all of that. The current Warriors are one of the greatest squads ever, right? Basically them and the Miami Heat with LeBron James, just two of the best of all time. But keeping a team all on the same page to go for titles year after year is a really, really hard thing to do, because you have a bunch of young players, a bunch of, 20-something guys that are making a ton of money, that have a lot of other things, right? Maybe they want to be a star. Maybe they want to be in an environment they like. Maybe they don't like playing second fiddle. That was one of the fascinating parts about LeBron James's teammates, particularly Chris Bosh and Kevin Love, where both of them kind of expressed kind of dissatisfaction by having to become second fiddle to LeBron, maybe arguably even Kyrie Irving. And you go, your money didn't get hurt. Your status for Hall of Fameness didn't get hurt, right? You made the same number of All-Star games you would have otherwise, right? Your regular seasons are better, but playing second fiddle to LeBron James psychologically wasn't easy for you. And the reason I bring that comparison is Kevin Smith, even some people I respect have basically bashed him for his kind of late career change, because early he was this indie film darling that was making these, provocative movies. Arguably, he peaked at Dogma, where he made this film about religion with all sorts of stuff. And then he kind of just fell into this loop of basically remaking Jay and Silent Bob themed movies, or movies with his friends, like the Tusk movie, which is a horror film based on a podcast with him and his friends. And then he made another horror film, Yoga Hosers, which he put his daughter to star in. And him and Adam Sandler, to me, did a very interesting thing late in their career, which is they said, this is my job. My goal could be to make amazing films that are critically well received, or I can have fun with my friends and get paid for it. Adam Sandler has at this point notoriously been known for making movies based on their location so he can get a free, he's like, hey, I think that's what happened with 50 First Dates. That was like the start of it. He's like, hey, let's go to Hawaii. I'll set this movie in Hawaii. We get to make a movie in Hawaii. And then he's had, if you watch lots of his movies, especially ones with like Rob Schneider, made by I think Gilmore Madison or Happy Madison, I think is what his company is.
Production company. Yeah.
His production company that makes the movies. A lot of them happen in like tropical areas. It's like, he's like, hey, I want to pay my friends, right? I forget all of the names of all of Adam Sandler's friends, but you can recognize them because they're in all the movies.
Yeah.
I want to make a movie. I want these guys to get paid. I want to go someplace fun and have a vacation with them, and I'm going to get paid lots of money for it. In Adam Sandler's case, they're financially successful. In Kevin Smith's case, he would make the argument, well, they might not be like Judd Apatow darlings. He makes them for so cheap that no movie distributor is going to get upset with them. They don't lose money, right? Batman v Superman made close to $1 billion, if not over $1 billion worldwide, and it was considered a failure because they invested hundreds of millions of dollars in it and were projecting it to make more. Whereas like Kevin Smith, they're like, here's 5 to 10 million. He's like, I made your money back and it's going to do good on DVD. So like, sweet. So the point with like Kevin Durant comparing to Kevin Smith / Adam Sandler is like, we go, why don't you want to be one of the greatest of all times and be in a title run year after year after year? And you go, maybe as a career, he wants to go to a place that he likes and have fun and not have the stress of that. And I feel that's always a weird comparison when we're looking at players. When we try and judge their careers, it's like we should view it through the lens of like Adam Sandler. Maybe they want an Adam Sandler career. Maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. We've thought Carmelo Anthony for years played it right? He would get max salary, play in good environments on teams that were going to do pretty well while doing lots of good off the court stuff to make money. I can't really fault Kevin Durant for that, but that I did want to get that metaphor out there because I was thinking about that the other day.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I hope it's true. I really hope it's true. The reporting says that it's more like he wants to prove to everyone that he's better than LeBron, and the only way to do that is to go to the worst team in the league and build it up, basically. That he cares about winning and being the best so much, that's why he wants to do it. That is a much sadder interpretation, and I hope your version is true and not the reported version.
I think he should go to the Lakers, man. I honestly think that's the scenario for him. Great market. He gets to play next to LeBron. Basically, LeBron James is only going to last, 3 more seasons there. He takes over the team after. I think he should go to the Lakers. That's my take.
Yeah, I'd love that. Yeah. I mean, any good team that he goes to would be good, I think.
And by the way, same point as other things. That this is one of my litmus tests for like a player jersey retirement. If a player is a key component of a title squad in your team, they get their jersey retired. If I'm the owner, that's my metric. So Kevin Durant's jersey damn well better be retired in whatever arena the Warriors end up in. That's my take.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, last point on this series is Houston politicking free throws, which is kind of fascinating. So what's happened is apparently they've approached the league using the league data. So the league does a ref report where they review all of the refs' calls and non-calls. This really happened after the Tim Donaghy scandal years ago, where there was a ref who was fixing NBA games. So the NBA now has reports of how well they think refs do or don't do. And it's somewhat frustrating, right? Because the NBA will release reports where your team loses by 3. And the next game they come over and they say, hey, by the way, that foul we called in the last 30 seconds, that was incorrect. We shouldn't have called it. And you can go, well, that likely cost them the game. As an example, for what it's worth, last season, when the Milwaukee Bucks almost upset the Boston Celtics, the first game went to overtime and Giannis fouled out. Apparently, I've reached my move ring on my Apple Watch. Awesome. All right. So Giannis fouled out in the first in game 1 that went to OT and they lost. And don't forget this series went to 6. And the NBA came out and said, oops, that we shouldn't have called a foul on that. And so it's like, well, so that means Giannis should have been in overtime. And that is a huge, that is a huge loss to that team. So they're starting to do this. The Houston Rockets have come forward and said that essentially they believe the NBA is not calling enough fouls against them, and that has cost them both last season and arguably this season because they lost game 1 by 4 points. D'Antonio, I believe, had a quote where he said, they came up and said they missed fouls on four 3-point attempts in the first half. That's 12 points. That's 12 attempts. And an 70 to 80% thing, that's 8 points. Don't need to tell you what that does. So the Houston Rockets are making this case, and I think that's very, very interesting. And I've got a lot of takes on it, but I want to let you chime in, and then I've got some response takes to kind of the zeitgeist I've seen around it, including some big names in analytics, big names, I guess I'll put in quotes, but like Nate Duncan's had some takes on it, which I think are just off, frankly.
That's funny. Yeah. I don't know. Usually when I talk about the Warriors, I try to not show all my biases. For instance, I was just saying, yeah, sure, Kevin Durant, go to the Lakers. Why not? That'd be great. This is not one of those cases, Dre. I am really on the Warriors side on this one and think the Rockets are being ridiculous. So that's the beginning of my conversation.
We're going to fight. Okay, so what is the problem with the Rockets here?
So one of the really biased Warriors Twitter tweeted this out. Probably Sam Esfandiari from Warriors World.
Or like Feltbot maybe, yeah.
This is bad faith basketball by the Rockets. And I agree. They're flopping every single play. They're not even trying to make those 3-point shots. Like, it's just ridiculous to watch. And so this is my overall, my high-level point, and I have tons of smaller ones, but the high-level point is I can already see how Game 2 is going to go, right? The Rockets are going to get the ball in the first play they have it. They're going to give it to Harden. He's going to go ISO, and he's going to flop and test the refs on the very first play of the game. I know that's going to happen, Dre, and it's just a stupid flopping metagame. And look, I can see some of the other perspective. The Warriors are undercutting them and more fouls should be called. Sure, call more fouls. But that's fine, right? They can field job by the refs. That's totally fine. And maybe the refs didn't do a good job. But the way they're playing is just pissing me off. It's so annoying.
So there's some interesting points to all of that. So what I'll first say is how they're playing might piss you off and what they're trying to do might piss you off. But I guess the take I would have is I don't feel what they are doing is a bad strategy. That is the key, because I've seen some people say they're coming off as whiners and it's just going to piss off the refs more. And I don't know if I agree with that. To get us political briefly, Brian, although I'll try and keep it.
The Rockets are Trump. That's the bottom line. No.
Well, the other way around, actually. What I would say is, there's this Mueller report that came out and people saying Congress really should call for an impeachment. And some people saying, well, I don't know if the numbers are there for Donald Trump to get impeached. But you go, one argument I've heard is if you get Trump in impeachment proceedings, a lot of this stuff just goes public. A lot of this stuff gets put on the record. A lot of, and there's an argument that I've heard, Arturo Galletti on Twitter, and you won't be shocked that he's on the Houston Rockets side for this.
I know. He's totally on the Rockets side.
Every time Congress has tried to impeach a president, arguably they weren't successful, right? Even though Bill Clinton, I think, got impeached, but then didn't get removed, right? I forget the voting scheme or whatever, right? Because you have to have both the House and the Senate.
The Senate did not find him guilty, yeah.
Senate didn't, House did, right? And then, of course, with Richard Nixon resigned first. So with both of them, it was arguably unsuccessful. You could make the argument that the opposing party gained significant political traction by that, right? The Republicans did end up with the House and Senate after and the presidency.
That is an argument people put out there a lot. I think it's totally wrong, but yes, it is an argument.
Oh man, we got both to go on, so maybe off air you and I will talk more, or we'll see if it is enough. But you and I have to come back. But I was just going to say, the argument being, it is silly to say, just don't argue. You come off as a whiner when you go. If you don't argue, nothing happens. But if you argue, there's a possibility something happens. One of the greatest coaches of all time, Phil Jackson, in all of his books would argue that he would do stuff like this. In press conferences, he would get fines. He would go after the refs. He would complain to the NBA because he would go, it is really key for them to call the games the way they say they're going to. So I'm going to argue on behalf of my team. And more importantly, I would say, if you think that there is a edge to be gained by arguing with the refs in the NBA, it is worth millions of dollars just in revenue alone, right? Another round of the playoffs is worth millions of dollars. I believe that the Warriors recently, I would love to see this data league-wide. The Warriors recently, I think it was Tim, what's the last name? Writes for The Athletic now, right?
Tim Kawakami is a Bay Area guy.
I believe
he writes about the Warriors. Yeah,
wrote an article about like the financial breakdown, and like the Warriors were making like $5 to $10 million a game in the finals. So that is, making the finals is worth so freaking much for an NBA team just on 1 year. Let alone, I mean, like Dave Berry's research, which is old and outdated. Not to insult it, but I'm saying I could only argue it's gone up. Where he argued winning a title helps future attendance records and future deals, et cetera. So that's only gotten higher than when he wrote Wages of Wins a decade ago. So making the finals is worth so much money to a team that it is ridiculous for you to say, well, why are you whining about this? Last week when I was talking about Russell Westbrook and potentially getting hollow rebounds, which whatever the fuck that means, I was saying he has a very obvious financial incentive to do it. When someone has an obvious financial incentive to do something, you're like, why are they doing this? You just kind of stare and you go, you answered your own question. So from a political standpoint, I don't think what the Rockets are doing is wrong. And again, we're going to have to talk more for sure on that, because I'd be curious to see, because people saying, even if they don't think they can impeach Trump, politically it's a savvy maneuver and has been in the past. That's to me a novice. So that's why I want to talk to you more. Seems like a compelling argument. And if you want to answer that there, I'll do that. And I would say the same thing for the Rockets. And then the last point I would give, and this is what Arturo is arguing, is the Rockets are claiming using the NBA's own data. So this is the data the NBA is providing. They're saying, you are giving us a spreadsheet. We are looking over the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet seems to show a bias against us. That's a tough pill to kind of argue against.
Well, it's for one thing, it's the Rockets spreadsheet, right? So of course they're going to argue.
Spreadsheet using the NBA's data, though. That's the key.
That's fair. So I guess what I'd say is maybe the spreadsheet is accurate, maybe it's not. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know, but at the same time, I wouldn't trust it right away. So I actually agree with everything you just said. I think it is a good strategy for the Rockets, and they should be doing it. They should be trying to get to the finals and get all that money, like you said. I just don't like it because it's like dirty play. Like it's breaking the rules. They're cheating. And here's what I mean. I don't mean the complaining, by the way. So the Warriors are the worst ref complaining team in the league, and I hate it. I hate when they complain the refs. Not a big fan of when the Rockets and other teams do it too, but whatever. It is what it is, right? You really want to win. You really care about winning. I can see why those guys complain to the refs. What I'm saying I don't like is the actual play, during the game, which is like kicking out your feet and flopping and like charging basically every play, which is what they're doing. So
let me ask you a question, which I'm gonna admit this is in that devil's advocate territory. So I'll admit that you can just smack me down there if you want. Are there any concrete analytics you have about foul rates or methods that the Rockets use versus other teams that make this bad? Because that to me is one question. Is like, I've seen clips, right? I've seen like clips of like James Harden flopping, or there's like a phantom blow, right? Where this is really famous, right? Where like, I think it was Patrick Beverley or so, not Patrick Beverley, who wasn't, I forget who they played in round one. Apologies. It would have had to have been one of the,
who the Rockets played in round one?
One of the Jazz players, but one of the Jazz like swipes his arm. It misses. It is wrestling, right? It misses by a country mile.
Yeah.
James Harden snaps his head back and falls over. Refs don't call anything, but you're like, are you like that deserves a yellow card at bare minimum, right? Like something.
And this is why it's so bad faith. He's gonna flop. Okay, here's the analogy I thought, Dre.
I guess all I'm saying to that, sorry, before I let you finish, but is there evidence you have beyond the eye test that the Rockets do this more or worse than other teams in the NBA?
No, it's just the eye test. But based on the eye test, though, to me, it's like the reverse of the Bad Boys Detroit Pistons. Remember them? Chuck Daly. And I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something to the effect of, if we foul them every play, the refs can't call every foul, right? That's a bad faith strategy. They're like trying to cheat the refs. So with the Rockets, it's the same thing. It's like, if we flop every play, they're not going to call some of them, but, you know, they're going to call a lot more than they would have if they weren't flopping. And I'll put it to you this way. So, you know, did the Warriors do some undercutting fouls that didn't get called, or landing zones, whatever the name of that rule is? Yeah, they should call more of them for sure. But would the Rockets defenders then want those charges I was talking about, like warding off with the offhand, or, again, kicking your feet into the other players? Would they want those charges called as well? Or would they want the technical foul for flopping called? They don't call those anymore. They should have called 10 or 12 of those in that game. So
I was going to say on that was one thing. So a few years ago, the NBA did try and do more anti-flopping measures. But what they did that seemed to me so freaking stupid is they made it a financial incentive, right? If we catch you flopping after the game, we can assess you a hefty foul, a hefty fine. And by the way, hefty meaning $25,000 to $50,000, somewhere in that range. Now, admittedly, that's not chump change, even to the richest NBA player. That stings a little, especially like a player only making $1 million, or a player like a player on a 10-day contract that could be their entire salary. Sure, but like you're saying, that's not an incentive worth it. And in fact, to what we're like, we noted this similar venue, but not game related. Magic Johnson was fined $300,000, I believe, somewhere near there, for tampering by saying he wanted Paul George on the Lakers. If Magic Johnson got Paul George for $300,000 as a tampering fine, Paul George is over $100 million contract. In the modern world, a headhunter fee for finding a talented, six-figure plus person a year, their fee is more proportionately than that. So to Magic Johnson, he's like, I'll pay $300,000 if you tell me I get Paul George. Who gives a fuck, right? Like, it's worth the risk. If you're going to let me have the platform, right, to go out and say it, we're arguing like the same argument that the Rockets are doing. Like, if they think complaining gets them an edge, go for it. And so the same thing, right? If I'm coaching the Rockets, if I'm Daryl Morey or the owner, not Leslie I forget who the new owner is, but Leslie Alexander back in the day. And it's the NBA conference finals, NBA, second round. And James Harden is running the risk of getting $50,000 to $100,000 for flopping. I'm going to go, listen, it's worth over $1 million a game. We're going to make $5 million on the gate revenue alone on the next round. If we advance, I'll cover it. Or if I'm not allowed to cover it, when you retire, you're going to get a $50,000 car as a thank you gift for all you've done for the team. Effing do it. They made like you're saying with the reffing. Part of the problem is they made the incentives incorrect, right? They did not attack anti-flopping with, if you keep doing this, we're going to kick you out of the game, which they really should have.
That's right. Everything is the league's fault here. Like, let's go back to the Warriors. The Warriors complain to the refs in an abusive way every game, and the league doesn't do enough to discourage it. They should get. if I were the league in the offseason, I would say, look, we got to change this. We got to stop all this crap, right? But they don't. They just let them keep doing it. And it's the same thing with the Rockets. So, yeah, the league has just decided we're just going to kind of let the refs get bowled over by the players. And I'm usually on the players' side, on this kind of stuff. So I can see why they're frustrated, So here's some more, in the Rockets' favor. I've heard the point of view that, well, if the Warriors are landing in their landing zones on all these shots, what else can they do aside from flop and kick their feet out and try to influence the refs? And I don't know. It's the same argument in politics, right? If one side is bad faith, does that mean everyone has to be? I don't think so. I think the answer is do the right thing.
I've got two notes just to end on. I'll say first off, I brought this up a while back, Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic. If you look at both players in terms of how many points they normally take in the paint, if you look at the foul rate between the two, Embiid gets a far higher foul rate than Jokic. And I broke down their games, and there's a subtle difference. Jokic takes many more floaters, hook shots, etc. than Embiid. Embiid takes far more dunks. And if you look at the optics of getting fouled on a dunk versus the optics of getting fouled on, a floater, they don't look the same. And way back in the day on the now defunct Short Corner podcast, Paul Shirley, one of the co-hosts, a former NBA player, would note that fouls happen on so many plays. It's the bad boy Pistons point, right? Like the refs can't call every foul because the game would go 4 hours and no one would watch. So a lot of fouls happen, and basically the refs will sometimes just call the ones that have the better optics, which is something that James Harden, back in the day, pre-James Harden, Manu Ginobili were known for, is I know how to get the refs' attention, so they'll call a foul. That happens a lot because I know they can't call every foul. That's just a theory. And I'd argue that 3-pointers, it seems like, I could be wrong, get called on fouls less than 2-pointers, and it could just be the optics. So this could be the Rockets trying to adjust the league to say the type of shot we take doesn't get called the same, and we would like it to. So that there is definitely that. And the last point I brought up Nate Duncan. So the Dunked On podcast, I saw him tweeting. So two names I've been following on Twitter about this: Nate Duncan, Arturo Galletti. Arturo Galletti, Rockets. They're right. I do this every day of the week. Nate Duncan, they're whiners. What surprises me is Nate Duncan, I don't know if he still practices, but at least was a law student, I believe a lawyer. And I would say any lawyer that goes, you've got a document from the NBA that admits to blah, and you have a case here, to tell them to shut up seems odd. And I mean, we know people serve multiple masters when they do this, when they make podcasts, who they want to please, et cetera. But it does seem odd to me to see like lawyer people and analytics people go, I'll give you your take 100%, Brian. I don't like it. I'm fine with that. But to go with the Rockets shouldn't do it, it's like there is a very clear incentive for the Rockets to do it, and I see a problem with it. The problem with them trying to, if they can get away with it without a major fine or it not working, the Rockets trying to game the refs or arguably straighten out the refs if they think the refs truly are biased seems like a completely viable strategy.
Yeah, it's just sad to me because they don't need to do it. Like, I think they're as good as the Warriors, and if they actually just played their game, they could compete in the series. But they're doing what they did last year, right? They want to do this meta game that's their own, game of isolation play and flopping, and it is what it is. And yeah, like I said, I'm being very biased in this segment, right? I was not a fan of 90s basketball where you dropped into the low post and ground down the shot clock and played isolation every time. I didn't like that. So when the Suns came around, coincidentally, Mike D'Antoni as well, and teams started picking up the pace and, the Warriors playing the style, plenty of people hate the Warriors style, but I like it. I like the passing and the cuts and, the layups and the three-point shooting. So I love it. So when I see the Rockets, who are playing kind of a hybrid style, the isolation plus the three-point shooting, but then add all these flops on top of it, and all they're trying to do is work the refs instead of make the shots. Yeah, it's just aesthetically, I don't like it. So that's my complaint.
All right. This is kind of a weird shout. So I'll do the kind of half-hearted shout out, I guess subtweet, fuck that guy of the week, and then we'll move on to Game of Thrones. So I'll let you finish off anything else you want to say on the playoffs. We didn't make any predictions. We're like one game in. I'll say the following. Think Toronto is fine, although they are down 13 at the half. I'm not worried at all about the Bucks. Denver should be getting more favored. Come on, they can do it. Come on, Denver, you can do it. And I think the Warriors with a 1-0 lead have the edge now. And, kind of a backhanded compliment, insult, whatever you want to call it, to the Rockets, Brian, is if Morey's analytics team had just spent more time, scouting players to have instead of Eric Gordon and Austin Rivers, instead of trying to game the refs, maybe you just have a better player and just be a better team outright.
There you go. Yeah. No, I don't have too much to close out on. The teams are also good at this point that, it's going to come down to things like injuries and who's making their shots. And yes, the refs at times. These are all going to be close.
All right. Just wanted to make a note. So it's like, fuck Forbes. So we kind of mentioned this a little last week. And I'm not going to go as long as I thought I would just because I'd rather talk Game of Thrones than this. But they have now released like 4 pieces using a underpaid player or overpaid player-ish metric. And then, these are bloggers. So they're paid by Forbes, but it's not like, if this makes any sense, Forbes will farm out, they'll pay you to write a certain number of articles a month. This used to be the situation Dave Berri was in. So it's not explicitly like a Forbes staff writer doing this writing, but it is someone that is contracted by Forbes to do this writing. They've now done like 4 or 5 pieces that uses wins produced by name in the article to talk about overpriced and underpriced players. And several of these articles have listed Dave Berri by name, saying like using Dave Berri's methodology. And so what we said, I think we mentioned this last week, is first off, they fired Forbes for using this methodology to say WNBA players are underpaid. NBA PR came out and tried to say, hey, WNBA players, people are saying they're underpaid and this is their average salary. But when you factor in, housing and medical and all this, they're actually paid higher, which whatever. Nice try, NBA. So it's like just saying fuck Forbes onto both telling Dave to go away for using this methodology for the WNBA, still using a methodology. And, I don't necessarily begrudge the writers doing this because, if they're paid by Forbes to do it, but it is also kind of, given that they were doing a lot of editorial oversight to Dave Berri at the end of his tenure there, it is somewhat sleazy to let these people write using Dave Berri's methodology, especially given that Dave Berri used to write for Forbes, because it gives the air that Dave Berri is approving these type of articles. So they're basically paying other people to write Dave Berri-ish articles, to use Dave Berri's name, despite the fact that they cut Dave Berri over this exact type of analysis, except that he was using it on the WNBA and the NBA was unhappy with that. So fuck that.
That's bizarre. I guess I have to ask, what's going to happen there? Are they just going to keep using his name? Are you allowed to do that?
There's nothing explicitly wrong to say I'm copying a methodology of this other person and here's what I'm saying. They use Boxscore Geeks. What I will say is frustrating is they're doing something that I absolutely hate, and even some analysts I like do this bullshit, which is you go in and you take like wins produced, win shares, BPM, RPM, as many fucking PMs as you can find. By the way, random litmus test, if your metric has PM in it, if you're using an advanced stat that has the letters PM in it, it's probably a crap stat. I think I've yet to find one that I approve of. That's all of them. Subtweet of the week. They take them all and they like average them and they go, so using an average of their BPM, win shares, and wins produced, all of those metrics use the same box score ingredients. So trying to just do a straight average blend of them and think it means effing anything is ludicrously bad data analysis. I've been messing up the word analysis lately on the show, Brian. It's bugging me. But anyway, it is just horrible data analysis to do that. And it's worth saying a lot of the people that do analytics on the web, that they're not people that have studied math and stats and economics for years. I mean, even some of the people, like I think I do believe Dean Oliver has like some mathematics background. He doesn't know anything about regression analysis. And regression analysis is a cornerstone of many of the modern advanced stats that are used, where I would say wins produce is the only one that is done correctly by someone who knows what the hell they're doing. So it's like people that do this analysis don't necessarily know what they're doing, and the blended one is just one of the worst and one of the biggest offenders. And I even see people that should know better do it. So it's like that's what some of the recent Forbes articles are doing. They're doing Dave's methodology, so to speak, but instead of just using wins produced, they're averaging like in win shares and BPM, and Dave's like, I would never use those two metrics. So anyway, I don't know if he can do anything other than say, please keep my name off of it. And I don't know if they'll respect that or not, or if he even cares. I mean, it gets traffic for the Boxscore Geeks, so for fucking whatever, but it's just, it makes us even that more fans of Forbes than we were before. Oh, funny, last note, I forget the guy's name and I'm not going to give him the I'm not going to give him the traffic. I'm not even going to bother looking it up. What's funny is Dave Berri had an editor at Forbes, the one who fired him. I used to retweet Dave Berry's posts over at Forbes all the damn time. Guy never follows me. I insult him for the type of stuff he's doing, and he tries to follow me right after that. So I'm like, and then you can do this on Twitter. You can do the unfollow trick. So what you do is you block someone and then you unblock them. So he can still read my stuff if he wants, but you do a block unblock so it forces them to unfollow you. Because I was like, no, you didn't follow me when I was proudly following one of your writers and tweeting out his stuff. You didn't follow me then. I'm not letting you follow me just to see what crappy stuff I say about you. F off. So anyway.
Sounds like they deserve that kind of pettiness. I just want to show one tweet here about the WNBA. In response to that NBA PR statement you were talking about, which was ludicrous, Breanna Stewart was not very happy about it. Oh, so this is what we're doing now, she replied. And yeah, she's part of the reason why this whole conversation came up. We mentioned it last week. Had something really bad, right? Like an Achilles injury, playing in Europe. So yeah, this got to be so frustrating for her watching this get whitewashed after, she's having to deal with all this while being like the face of the WNBA. Like think if LeBron or Giannis was in Breanna Stewart's situation, Dre, right now, how ridiculous that would be. Like, anyway, yeah, that's all I got to say on this.
Yeah, and we'll that'll definitely be an off-season topic we talk more. All right, so Game of Thrones spoilers. Leave, turn off if you're not caught up on Game of Thrones or you don't want things spoiled. I don't think we'll go too long because we've already gone over an hour, Brian. But I will just say this: I was a huge fan of the episode. It was very satisfying. I'm not really upset by some of the minor gripes I might have seen, but Team Arya. Wait, that we can't spoil. We can't. I intentionally left out Jamal Murray's game winner. I intentionally left out. We stopped talking about Damian Lillard's game winner because Arya killed the Night King, and it was freaking awesome. It was very satisfying. It was funny because I would say last season Game of Thrones had a lot of satisfying moments where it wasn't really cohesive. You might have some complaints about this season. One I saw that I'm actually in the boat of, Brian, is this episode was really made to be watched on a TV from a decent distance. Mm-hmm. A lot of people stream and watch on their computers, so it was very dark. So I saw people like, I watch this on my TV. I don't know what people are complaining about. And then I saw people like myself that I'm like, man, it's really dark and hard to see what's going on. It's like, yeah, if you watch on I was joking to my mom about this. I have a computer monitor that is bigger than the first television I bought myself that I thought was big. When I was in college, I bought myself a 25-inch cathode ray tube, barely fit in the back of my Honda Accord. It was like I had to take it out of the box and shift it. Huge. I thought it was a huge freaking TV. I was watching reruns of 30 Rock from the Sun this week, and he buys, at one point, one of the aliens buys his girlfriend a giant TV, and it's supposed to be, he's like, I spent all this money on this big TV for you, and I pawned some of your family heirlooms to do it. And I looked and I was like, that TV is so hilariously small. And the amount you're saying it is so hilarious because, like I said, you can go to Costco and get a 50-inch TV for like $400 now. It's bizarre. So it's a fun change of world, but watching it on your monitor versus watching it on a TV is a very big difference. So that kind of gripe aside, but the Game of Thrones episode, I really enjoyed it. And I thought this season has been a lot more cohesive than last season. So both narratively, I've liked how it's gone, and it's given me some moments I like. And then my big takeaway that I was telling you, Brian, was I thought that the NBA playoffs had basically more shocks in the first couple of games of round 2 of the playoffs than Game of Thrones did. There were not a lot of major character deaths.
Well, so it's funny because the twist in that episode of Game of Thrones was almost that there were no twists, right? That they stated a plan that everyone thought was lame, and then they just went out and actually executed that plan, and it worked, kind of. But the episode was done well enough that it all made sense, though. I don't know if this is what I'm saying makes sense, but I thought they could not have pulled off the whole kill the Night King and cause everyone to disappear plan better than they did, the showrunners, that is. So I thought they did execute it pretty well. How do I rate this episode? It's probably not the best, Miguel Sapochnik episode, if you pronounce his name that way. I liked Hard Home a lot more, was much better one of his episodes. I guess I like it about the same as the Castle Black battle, that was pretty good too. That was one of his other big episodes. So yeah, I liked it. It gave me a feel of Terminator 2, Dre. The music was very similar. It was very dark and, kind of dusty and, smoky and icy all at the same time. And like you said, very hard to see. So yeah, it felt like the flashbacks to the future from Terminator 2 when they're doing those, future battles. So, and it did feel like, again, kind of like Battle of the Bastards. That's just his style, of this director's style of doing these battles, right? You're so like you're swarmed over and the characters are literally getting buried by dead bodies, and it's very suffocating for them and very chaotic. This is kind of the same theme of all Game of Thrones battles. I think the characters are good fighters individually, but they're all terrible at strategy and tactics. Like, they've never really had a good battle strategy or tactic. Like, I guess this is Bran's strategy that they used to win this, but it didn't seem very good, even though they won, right? They sacrificed all these people for no reason, and the characters are just really dumb. So that kind of continued as well.
And his argument was, if you really wanted the Night King to buy that Bran was bait, which, I mean, so if you haven't watched the episode, and you're still with us, thank you.
No, this is
the basic plan was Bran is bait. He's staying in the werewood, and I guess he was warging into like dragons and birds during the episode, but the only real reason to do that, or just birds, right? He like the birds swarm the dragon, but so he was warging into things during the episode, but the only reason to do that was to let the Night King know he was there, so the Night King could sense him. And so he's got this big defense. So basically they're saying, hey, someone you really want to get is really well guarded. And if they don't do that, if they don't have all of those people there to guard it, the Night King's not going to buy it. And if they run, the Night King's got a superior army that's only going to grow, because don't forget that the frustrating part about how the Night King and the White Walkers work is every time you kill an army, you get those dead people, which happened in this episode, right? They stomped over a line of defense. After they stomp over that line of defense and the Night King gets there, he can resurrect them all, and boom, their army's now twice the size it was before. So they're going to lose if they keep letting the army advance and winning minor battles. So they have to stop them. The only way to stop them is to take out the Night King, which to your point about why this didn't feel as contrived, because the two terms you'll hear about this episode are Deus Ex Machina and Mary Sue.
Yes.
Deus Ex Machina being the just like it does mean like, I believe means like machine of God.
Yeah.
And the idea being that something out of nowhere comes along to save the day. Basically God shows up to say like, oh, you're free, you're saved. And what I'll note is, first off, if you're a science fiction fan, I tweeted this out today, Brian. I said, if you're a science fiction fan whose staples are Star Wars, underrated farm boy manages to defeat unstoppable space base basically via space magic, and a fan of Lord of the Rings, where their entire plan, very similar, is throw this ring into a volcano and destroy an unstoppable force of evil. If those are the staples, and the Avengers have done this, right? First Avengers movie had this happen. So it's like, this is a tentpole of sci-fi. So if that kind of trope of destroy the head and this big army goes away bugs you, you're in the wrong freaking genre. The joke I made said that would be like complaining about dunking in basketball. So there's that. The Mary Sue trope, which I didn't even really see, but I've seen some people pre-countering, is like, one thing they did very freaking well with Arya is they're like, we literally have spent 7 years of this woman getting girl, right? So girl to woman. She has spent all of her adolescence getting trained by the best and most proficient killers in all forms of killing, in being sneaky and killing and fighting, etc. We have spent 7 years training her for this exact moment. There has never been a person more well placed to have a combination of stealth and fighting in this scenario. There's no Mary Sue-ness there. Mary Sue being named after fan fiction, so that's person writing up their own story, where someone wrote like a perfect character that has no flaws. And so the Mary Sue is one of the most misused characterizations. It's often used in a sexist way against female characters, where like, this female character is overpowered, and you go, well, even if yes, that's the genre, and second off, you don't seem to have that complaint when there are men in the same genre that are overpowered. But Arya is like not overpowered. They established why the White Walkers were built, right? It was magic gone wrong. And that was why Arya's stab worked and the dragon fire didn't. So Arya stabs the Night King in the same spot that he was formed, right? Because magic formed him by getting stabbed with an ice dagger. She stabbed that with Valyrian steel, so that basically undid the spell. He resurrects using the same magic, and they've established before that if you kill off the kind of head vampire, the others fall too. So like, that's the thing is like, well, this might not be the Game of Thrones twist we're used to. It was very straightforward, and it all flowed. Like narratively, it all made sense, which is why I had no problem with it.
Yeah, I didn't have any problems with any of those tropes you're talking about either. I think your analysis was right there. It was good. A good end for Arya's arc, probably. And I mean, we'll see if it's really over. Maybe she'll do more stuff. Who knows? But yeah, it was a nice payoff, right? And people are saying, oh, it was kind of a video game style thing, right? She fought a bunch of people. Then she did the stealth in the crypts. And then she did like the cinema boss battle where you have to press a couple of buttons. I mean, maybe that's a complaint, but it was done really well. Like, I thought the crypt stealthing was really one of my favorite scenes in the episode. So I guess so here's the big thing for me, Dre, just to get more high level here for a moment. We can go back down in the weeds if we want after this, but we were speculating last season, or I guess we were guessing, which way is it going to go, right? Is the Night King going to be the final battle, or is it going to be against Cersei? And they've answered that, right? They said, well, we're killing the Night King, he's out of the way, and we're going to have this final battle with Cersei next, is where it seems to be going. So that would be a nice payoff. That's what we wanted. I'm not sure if that's totally true yet. They may have to fight Cersei, and then they may fight each other. I would not be surprised if Dany versus Jon is the final conflict after Cersei. We don't know. 3 episodes is not that much, but they're very long. And the big thing I'm missing, though, is who was the Night King, and why was he doing what he's doing? I don't think Bran's and Sam's answer from episode 2 is enough. Like, I think we still need to know more there. And just to finish up on that, though, because all the action of the series, everything that happened, Robert's rebellion, everything after that all came from Rhaegar, right? Rhaegar, Daenerys' brother, Jon's dad, he's the one that set all the things in motion. And why? Because he discovered this Prince Who's Promised prophecy. So it has to mean something, I think. If they do just turn away from it and say it means nothing at all, I'll be disappointed, but it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, that is the rough part about this show. And we've seen the showrunners do that, where they were given a high-level outline of where everything was going, and they follow it. But season 7, as an example, is like, this doesn't really flow together. You hit the narrative points you needed to hit.
Bad pacing.
But we don't know. None of this goes together, whereas like George R. R. Martin would have it flow. I've seen some good think pieces about like Tyrion is one of the smartest characters in the show, but the last 3 seasons after we've gotten post book, instead of being like this smart guy that, sometimes overestimates himself or doesn't, or in the case way back in the day, Blackwater, right? The one with the dragon fire.
Maybe like the only example of good military tactics in the entire show, Trey, is Blackwater.
Which was Tyrion. And in the book, one thing that he screwed himself up on is like he decided to go out and attack himself out of basically loyalty to his family, which, is why he got like half of his face cut off. So all of this, is going on back then, and he's a smart character. And then post that, instead of seeming like a smart character that makes flawed mistakes, either for love or family or whatever, he just seems stupid. Well, that's because the showrunners aren't George R. R. Martin, and they just have high-level beats that they have to get him to. He has to be here, he has to be here, he has to be here. So it's possible all of this stuff doesn't really matter. And I mean, I do think that's interesting. I would be curious to see. So just as a note with the like, I never pronounce it right, but the Lord of Light, the one who was promised with the blade.
Yeah, I say Azor Ahai, but I don't know if that's right. That's like the gringo pronunciation.
Is Arya killed the Night King with a dagger that her mother, right? If you remember, the full story of this dagger is Bran was shoved out a window by Jaime Lannister. Then Jaime's illegitimate son that was posing as a son of Robert Baratheon, which is why he went on to be king, he sent an assassin to kill Bran, basically because his dad said that you should just put the kid out of his misery. Like in the book, how am I dropping his name? The Lannister, the worst Lannister. How am I? Joffrey.
Joffrey.
Everybody hates him. Like, basically, he was just like a sadistic bastard, decides to kill Bran because his dad said you should just put this sick animal out of his misery, pays an assassin to kill him. Lady Stark is there, and she stops the dagger from killing Bran, and she actually like cripples her hand because she grabs it, so it goes through blood. So you have this Valyrian steel dagger that has the blood of Catelyn on. I don't remember the full Azor Ahai prophecy, but I'm saying you have this very special dagger that is attacking the Night King in a very special spot, but really that's not explicitly noted. So to your point, that might have been the payoff George R.R. Martin foresaw in the books, and we just might never see it in the show.
Yeah, I've kind of generally feel different. I mean, you could be right. I feel like they probably work closer with Martin than you're getting at, like more than just the bullet points. I could be wrong, but I'd be surprised if they drastically changed it. But I don't know. We won't know until the end.
Okay, let's just do we'll end it because we've gone over, like, we're gonna hit that hour and a half mark, Brian. Woohoo! But I'll just say a couple of high things. I think first off, this sucks. I think Arya is dead. I mean, that was a very fulfilling thing. It makes a lot of sense for her to die trying to kill Cersei and then someone else to avenge her or whatever, right? Like, she's ticked all those boxes of like horrible things to do where, we can argue the character got a send-off, right? She finally hooked up with Gendry. There can't really be a future there, right? Because he has a claim to the throne, being Robert Baratheon's true son. She's, of the North. There is something there, right? So one or both of them is probably going to die. That's going to happen. Some other characters are going to die as well. We don't know who's going to end up on the throne. I will say also, just to tie this back to Lord of the Rings, for those that don't remember, Lord of the Rings, they throw the ring in the fire of Mount Doom. If you're looking at that last book, Return of the King, you're halfway through it. This is just giant book, and half of the book is them handling petty stuff at the end. So even if you're like, what the hell, they killed the Night King halfway through, Lord of the Rings did the exact same thing.
In fact, this might be wrong, but I think I read that George R.R. Martin was inspired to write the series based on the Scourging of the Shire from the end of
Interesting.
Lord of the Rings. That despite killing the evil god, they had all these petty political squabbles, basically. And so he's like, maybe I should write about that. So
yeah. In both Babylon 5 and Babylon 5 too, this idea of you have this super mega power that was trying to take over the world, that you kill them, there's still people that were associated with them that didn't die, and there's now a power vacuum. So that's nothing new. I don't know how I feel. We'll see how the last 3 episodes go. I mean, candidly, if this season is just these 3 episodes, I'm satisfied I got what I wanted. So
yeah, that's true. And the fact that they killed off so few characters in that battle may mean that there are 2 more big battles left, against Cersei and against each other, Jon and Dany. Maybe not. Maybe it's just 1 and everyone will die. Who knows? I still want to know what's going on with Bran. Like, even if the Night King doesn't get talked about anymore, Bran and his relationship to the Night King, I think there's got to be more shoes to drop there.
I think nothing happens, man. I'm sorry. I think you're gonna.
Oh man, we have to make some kind of a bet on that. I think it's like 50-50, but I really want more to happen. Because here's the thing about that prophecy. It's very, I guess, abstract is the right word to use for it, right? You're supposed to sacrifice one of your loved ones, and all these things are supposed to happen, and we don't really know what the full form of that will take yet, right? Like if Jon and Daenerys need to kill each other somehow to fulfill the prophecy was part of it. So I want to see it happen. Judging Martin, who is more of a guy who cares about politics than the magical side, I think you could be right, but I'm hoping that there's still another shoe to drop with Bran and the Night King. Like maybe Bran there's some theories I saw in Reddit. Maybe Bran has to build a new Night King out of Jon because it's the only way to save anyone from Cersei, right? They have all the tools there. They have the dragon glass, they have the witchwood tree, so they could make a new Night King. They have the knowledge. So and here's the last part of it. People were suspicious of the Bran and the Night King's interactions during the last episode. Like, it was suspicious that, the 2 of them weren't together till the end. So I still think there's something there, but we'll see.
I think it was just theatrics. I was basically like wrestling. Like when you watch wrestling and, one guy knocks over the other guy and it's like, just pin him. and instead he like goes and walks around or taunts him or something. I think it was just theatrics. So like I found that scene amusing too, because essentially like the Night King gets to, the werewood, and Bran's standing there with Theon, and the Night King's like, hey, if you want to just have a heartfelt conversation with Theon for like 30 seconds, I'll let you do it. And he does. And then like Theon charges him. He's like, hey, if you want to charge me, I'll let you do it. And then he comes up to Bran, right? This is a guy that threw a spear 40. I saw someone make this tweet on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
He threw a spear 40 yards to kill a dragon. And he walks up to Bran and is like doing this. It's like, effing really? But I think it's just theatrics. So we'll have a bet. We'll see who's disappointed or not, but I don't think anything comes of it.
I saw one theory. Last one, Dre. The Night King is immortal. He wants to die. He knows that Bran is the only one that can give him peace. By killing Bran, he kills himself, and they both die forever. And he failed in that. I
think Night King's gone, man. I think you get no more satisfaction, and now it's just stupid internal politics.
And even if he is gone, I feel like the story of him matters, though, to the humans somehow, because he would just exist. He exists as a plot device, but and not a character, right? What really matters is the reaction between the humans. But what is the story behind that plot device? That's what I want to know. So.
Well, I mean, in the show, like the whole reason Arya, when she stabbed him in the abdomen, if we're following the show's logic, it's that he is the first human that the children of the forest turned into a White Walker. That's the story we're presented with, and I mean that's cohesive.
And they did it to defend themselves against the invasion of the First Men. So maybe Bran will need to do it again to defend himself against the Gold Company.
Yeah, it could happen, but we'll see. I think, yeah. All right. Anyway, I've only got one shout out. Tomorrow, Tuesday, I'll try and get the show up tonight, so I may be tonight. Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fox. Tune in for Mental Samurai. Friend of the show, Chris Ye, is going to be on it. I don't know if you'll be able to make it down in the Bay. If you're in the Bay Area, I believe he's got a viewing party. So if you're following him on Twitter, Chris Ye, YEH, follow him on Twitter if you want to check that out. We've been loving the show Mental Samurai. I've been doing breakdowns every week at nerdnumbers.com of the pacing. I've started developing more and more advanced stats for that. So I think what I'm going to plan to do, Brian, so this is rough. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to turn it to you. I mock Brian often on the show because sometimes we'll come into the show and there's a Warriors game on and Brian's like, we can't talk about the Warriors tonight. And I'm like, but they're on. Like, but
not till the game's over. You need no eye test here, Dre, only data.
Of course. But I'll just say, I think I'm not going to watch Chris Ye's run live, probably, kids and all that. I get the show on Amazon. I think I'm going to record a live reaction. I'm going to turn into that. I'm going to at least do that video. So I think I'm going to do a live reaction to Chris Ye's run and record that and keep it unspoiled. So don't tell me anything. I'll try and avoid Twitter after 9 p.m. tomorrow. But definitely tune in for that. And then, of course, the box score stats will be up at Nerd Numbers about how good or bad Chris Ye's run goes.
Yeah, shout out to Chris as well. Unfortunately, I had to tell him that I could not do a live stream of the event for him tomorrow. I just don't have the equipment or knowledge to do that, unfortunately. But it should be a fun event still. And my shout out is to also some of the great memes, Dre, that came out of Game of Thrones and the NBA that were combined. I'll just give a couple. This is an important one from Cosmos. The Dothraki, this is actually not a meme. The Dothraki getting immediately jobbed after so many seasons of build-up is great. And yeah, the race has not been played very well in Game of Thrones, Dre. The Dothraki just dying for no reason was super lame. So I just want to point that out. Here's one I liked from Megan McArdle. This is a Infinity Wars last year spoiler, not this year. Thanos has an evil plan to wipe out half the life in the universe so they won't have to spoil Game of Thrones for him. I like that one. Here we have from Oliver Maroney, Arya Stark with the Wilt Chamberlain 100 sign, except it's got the Night King's head as one of the zeros. Two more from Network. This is my favorite one about how bad everyone is at battle tactics. Jon Snow, best battle tactics. 1, fight the Bolton Cavalry alone. 2, send the Dothraki into the dark. 3, kidnap a white. 4, build a flame trench behind my army. 5, yell at the dragon. You remember that scene? He just sat there in front of the dragon. That was funny. And 6, slowly walk towards the White King. That's from G. Wiss. So, yeah, Jon Snow, not the best fighter at tactics anyway. And then, yeah, we have Brannister as well. Those are all my shout-outs. Loved it.
And, of course, like I said, the Damian Lillard one. Damian Lillard being being Aria.
Yes.
Of course, because the Nuggets don't get the same recognition as other teams. They're so underloved. I hope they turn into the Warriors, Brian. Same thing, right? You come with this chip on your shoulder. You say, no one respects our team, which is true, right? The Warriors weren't respected initially. And then you win 3 titles and have 2 MVP players on your team. They're like, no one respects. It's like, no, everybody respects you. Same as saying, to be fair, I'll be mean, even though I love him. He's a great player. And he's a player that I always laugh at because every season it's a rumor that people are going to try and trade from. And I go, yeah, that's a no-brainer strategy. When people say Damian Lillard is disrespected, it's like he's a max contract, all-star, all-NBA player. There's no disrespect for Damian Lillard. So, yeah, anyway, I'll just say that Jamal Murray's shot, right? Nobody made like memes of Aria doing that, but the Aria killing the Night King memes that have now been incorporated into the NBA is just great. The Night King being called the 73-win Warriors for blowing a 3-1 lead. Also great. One of my favorite ones, Brian, I don't know if you showed it while you were going over all those really quick. I didn't hear it, at least out loud, because I'm not watching, watching the stream, was the the Andre Iguodala block.
Yes. No, I didn't show it. Go ahead, Dre.
What?
I didn't show it, so you should describe
it. You didn't show that? Okay.
No, but I've seen it.
But yeah, basically, so as people know, LeBron James blocked Andre Iguodala on arguably a game-winning layup that would have iced the game to win the Warriors' second or third finals, and LeBron James blocked it so that they put the Night King's head on Andre Iguodala and Aria's head on LeBron James, and so that was wonderful. So yeah, definitely appreciate all that. Okay, sorry for the long show. This has been the Boxscore Geek Show. If you found us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We go live every week, usually sometime between 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers, and you can catch the recaps on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. We have an iTunes and Stitcher show, the Boxscore Geek Show. Subscribe and upload. It helps us out. I've been your host, Trey Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. Co-host Brian Foster, you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Hopefully your team does well in the playoffs and character you like survives on Game of Thrones, because we will certainly be talking it next week.